Do you want to know the most devastating truth about human ambition? The harder you squeeze, the more everything slips through your fingers. Yes, you heard that right. You are living proof of this cruel paradox every single day. Look at your life right now. Really look. That relationship you're trying so desperately to save by doing everything right, it's becoming more distant with each calculated gesture. That career you're pushing for with overtime, networking, and endless strategizing, it feels more hollow with every forced smile and political maneuver. That dream body, that perfect life, that flawless image you're constructing piece by piece, it's becoming a prison that suffocates the very essence of who you truly are. You've been sold the biggest lie of modern civilization, that more effort equals better results, that control equals security, that trying harder is always the answer. But Michel de Montaigne, from his quiet tower in 16th century France, saw through this delusion with startling clarity. He understood something that today's productivity, gurus, and self-help prophets refuse to acknowledge. The very act of trying too hard is what destroys everything you're trying to achieve. The paradox of effort. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. You're addicted to struggle. You've been conditioned to believe that anything worthwhile must be difficult, that success without suffering is somehow illegitimate. This addiction to effort has become your identity. Without the constant striving, the endless pushing, the perpetual trying, who would you be? But here's the brutal truth. Your efforts are often working against you. That job interview you prepared for, your anxiety and forced enthusiasm probably lost you the position. That person you're trying so hard to impress? Your calculated charm is creating distance instead of connection. That goal you're obsessing over? Your attachment to the outcome is blocking the very paths that could lead you there. Montaigne observed this pattern centuries ago. He watched people destroy their marriages by trying too hard to be the perfect spouse. He saw artists ruin their work by forcing inspiration. He witnessed individuals lose their authentic selves by trying too hard to become someone they thought they should be. The stranglehold of expectation. Your expectations are killing your experiences. Every time you approach something with a predetermined outcome in mind, you've already limited the possibilities. You've put life in a box and demanded it perform according to your script, but life doesn't follow scripts. Life is improvisation, and the harder you try to stick to your predetermined plot, the more you miss the magic that's actually happening. This is why your most forced relationships feel hollow, why your most pursued goals feel empty when achieved, why your most calculated moves often backfire spectacularly. You're not dancing with life, you're trying to wrestle it into submission, and life, with its infinite complexity and wisdom, simply doesn't respond well to being controlled. The illusion of control. The most dangerous lie you tell yourself is that you can control outcomes. You can influence, you can act, you can choose, but control? That's a fantasy that's slowly destroying your peace of mind. Montaigne understood that the wise person learns to distinguish between what they can influence and what they must accept. But you're still fighting battles that can't be won, trying to control variables that don't answer to human will. This illusion of control is what makes you try too hard. You believe that if you just do more, plan better, work harder, you can force the universe to give you what you want. But the universe doesn't work that way. The universe responds to alignment, not force, to flow, not friction, to being, not doing. Are you ready to discover why your hardest efforts often yield your worst results? Are you prepared to learn how the ancient wisdom of letting go might be the key to getting everything you've been desperately trying to achieve. Because what follows will challenge everything you think you know about success, happiness, and the art of living well. The path ahead is not about giving up or becoming passive. It's about discovering a different kind of power, the power that comes from understanding when to act and when to allow, when to push and when to yield, when to try and when to trust. This is the wisdom that transforms struggle into flow, desperation into serenity, and forced outcomes into natural unfolding. You are strangling the life out of your own dreams. With every desperate attempt to control outcomes, every calculated move to force success, every anxious effort to manufacture the perfect result, you're killing the very thing you're trying to create. This isn't metaphorical, it's mechanical. Like gripping sand too tightly, the harder you squeeze, the more everything slips away. Montaigne watched this pattern play out in every aspect of human endeavour. He saw lovers destroy their relationships by trying too hard to be loved. He witnessed artists ruin their work by forcing inspiration. He observed politicians lose their influence by desperately grasping for power. The pattern was always the same. The intensity of effort was inversely proportional to the quality of the outcome. But why does this happen? Why does trying too hard create the opposite of what we want? The answer lies in understanding the fundamental difference between force and flow. When you try too hard, you're operating from a place of scarcity, fear, and control. You're telling the universe, I don't trust you to provide what I need, so I'm going to force it to happen. This energy of desperation creates resistance, not only in the external world, but within yourself. Think about your own experience. When you've tried too hard to make someone like you, what happened? They sensed your neediness and pulled away. When you forced a conversation or a solution, how did it feel? Strained, unnatural, inauthentic. When you've pushed too hard for a particular outcome, what was the result? Either failure or a success that felt hollow because it wasn't aligned with your true nature. The grip that destroys isn't just about external actions. It's about internal states. When you try too hard, you're gripping your own energy, constraining your natural flow, and cutting off your connection to intuition and spontaneity. You become like a musician who's so focused on hitting the right notes that they lose the music. Life has its own intelligence, its own timing, its own rhythm. But you've been trying to impose your desperate timeline on processes that unfold according to laws you don't understand. You plant a seed and then dig it up every day to check if it's growing. You start a relationship and immediately try to control where it's going. You begin a project and become anxious when it doesn't develop according to your predetermined schedule. Montaigne spent years observing this natural intelligence in action. He noticed that the best conversations happened when people stopped trying to be clever and simply spoke from their hearts. He saw that the most beautiful writing emerged when authors stopped forcing their words and allowed their thoughts to flow naturally. He observed that the deepest insights came not through intense mental effort, but through patient observation and quiet reflection. This isn't about being passive or lazy. It's about understanding that there's a difference between aligned action and forced action. Aligned action feels effortless even when it's challenging. It has a quality of flow, of being in sync with something larger than yourself. Forced action, on the other hand, feels like swimming against a current, exhausting, inefficient, and ultimately counterproductive. Everything has its season. There's a time for planting and a time for harvesting, a time for action and a time for rest, a time for speaking and a time for listening. But you've been trying to force spring in the middle of winter, to harvest before you've planted. to speak when you should be listening. This ignorance of natural timing is what makes your efforts feel forced and produces results that are out of alignment with what you truly want. The most powerful actions often feel effortless, not because they don't require energy, but because they're so aligned with your natural flow that they don't feel forced. When you stop trying so hard, you discover that many of the things you thought required enormous effort can actually be accomplished with surprising ease. You are living in a fantasy of control that is slowly destroying your peace of mind and sabotaging your actual effectiveness. Every moment you spend trying to control outcomes is a moment stolen from the present, where real life is actually happening. This obsession with control isn't just ineffective. It's the primary source of your suffering and the main reason why trying too hard creates the opposite of what you want. Montaigne understood something that modern life has forgotten: the distinction between influence and control. You can influence many things through your choices, actions, and responses. But control? True control over outcomes? That's an illusion that keeps you trapped in cycles of anxiety, frustration, and futile effort. Think about what you're actually trying to control. Other people's opinions of you, the timing of opportunities, the responses of others to your actions, the exact way your future unfolds. But none of these things are actually under your control. They're influenced by countless variables, most of which you can't even perceive, let alone manage. When you try too hard, you become a micromanager of your own life. You're constantly monitoring, adjusting, correcting, and trying to optimize every detail. This creates a state of chronic tension that actually diminishes your ability to perform, connect, and create. You become so focused on managing the process that you lose touch with the natural flow that would carry you toward your goals. Here's the paradox that will challenge everything you believe about achievement. Surrendering control often leads to better outcomes than trying to control everything. When you release your grip on exactly how things should unfold, you create space for possibilities you couldn't have imagined. When you stop forcing solutions, you allow elegant solutions to emerge naturally. Your need to control outcomes stems from your discomfort with uncertainty. But uncertainty isn't your enemy. It's the space where possibilities live. When you try to eliminate uncertainty through control, you're actually limiting the possibilities available to you. The most radical act you can perform in a world obsessed with control is to let go. Not to give up, not to become passive, but to release your desperate grip on outcomes and trust in the intelligence of the process. This letting go isn't a one-time event. It's a daily practice, a moment-by-moment choice to release the illusion of control and align yourself with the natural flow of life. Montaigne mastered this art through years of careful observation and practice. He learned to distinguish between the effort that comes from attachment and the effort that comes from alignment. He discovered that when he released his grip on specific outcomes, he often got results that were better than what he had originally wanted. More importantly, he found a peace and effectiveness that came from working with life rather than against it. Non-attachment doesn't mean not caring about outcomes. It means caring deeply about your actions while releasing your grip on the results. It means giving your best effort while remaining open to whatever unfolds. It means wanting things while not needing them to happen in a specific way or time frame. The paradox is that this lighter grip often leads to better outcomes. When you're not desperate for a specific result, you can see opportunities you might otherwise miss. When you're not attached to a particular path, you can adapt when circumstances change. When you're not needy for approval or success, you can act from a place of authentic power rather than compensatory effort. Acceptance isn't resignation. It's the foundation of effective action. When you accept what is, you stop wasting energy fighting reality and can channel that energy into responding skillfully to whatever situation you're facing. When you stop fighting what is, you discover that reality is actually quite workable. When you stop trying to force yourself to be different, you find that who you are is actually quite capable. Most importantly, acceptance allows you to act from a place of peace rather than anxiety, confidence rather than desperation, and wisdom rather than mere effort.